There exists a silent enemy that devours the energy of millions of people, the mind that cannot stop ruminating, thoughts that spin like rusted gears, repeating fears, guilts, and painful memories. You believe you are thinking, but in truth, you are prisoner to an invisible cycle that distances you from inner peace. Paramahansa Yogananda warned, "The restless mind is like a drunken monkey, incapable of remaining silent, always leaping from branch to branch. And while it governs, the soul loses its strength." But what if there were teachings capable of silencing this mental noise in mere moments? What if the key to true serenity lay not outside but within you, waiting only to be awakened? The masters have always known, peace is not the absence of problems, it is victory over the tyranny of the mind. And today, you will discover 6 direct teachings from Buddhist wisdom, revelations so powerful they can break once and for all the cycle of rumination and open space for luminous calm. Prepare yourself, because what you hear now may be the beginning of a completely different life. There exists a silent thief that inhabits your mind, more subtle than any street criminal, more persistent than any earthly obsession, mental rumination that devours your inner peace like invisible termites corroding the beams of a house. This intruder needs no open doors to enter. It materializes from the very air of repetitive thoughts, growing in power with each turn your mind takes in infinite circles of worry, analysis, and projection. Millions of souls walk the earth carrying this mental burden as if it were an inevitable curse, not knowing they carry within themselves the golden keys of their own liberation. But what if there existed millennial teachings, tested by generations of sages, capable of breaking these vicious mental cycles and restoring the natural serenity that is your spiritual birthright? 2,500 years ago, a prince renounced an earthly kingdom to discover the inner kingdom of absolute peace. And his discoveries continue to offer the most powerful antidotes against the tyranny of the mind that thinks too much. Today, you will discover 6 Buddhist teachings that not only explain how to stop rumination, but reveal how to transform your mind from enemy to ally, from source of torment to instrument of wisdom. The first and most revolutionary of Buddhist teachings about rumination is also the simplest. Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate your mind on the present moment. This is not a comforting philosophy, but a precise medical prescription for a mind sick with time, addicted to revisiting wounds that have already healed and anticipating tragedies that may never happen. Rumination is always an escape from the present, disguised as mental productivity. When you relive for the 1,000th time a difficult conversation or obsessively rehearse future scenarios, you are unconsciously avoiding confronting the only reality that demands your attention. This eternal moment where your life actually happens. It's like trying to drive looking only in the rearview mirror. You inevitably crash. There was a young monk who spent hours analyzing whether he had correctly chosen his monastic life, reviewing all the alternatives he had abandoned. His master took him to a rushing river and said, "Observe the water. It doesn't hesitate about where it has been, nor worry about where it will arrive. It simply flows with total presence in the current moment. That's why it crosses all mountains." The daily practice of absolute presence begins whenever you notice your mind wandering. Gently name it past or future, and redirect your attention to 5 elements of the current moment. 3 things you see, 1 you hear, 1 you physically feel. This sensory anchor instantly breaks the spell of rumination. The second teaching reveals a truth that liberates millions of imprisoned minds. Well, thoughts are temporary events in consciousness, not absolute truths that define your reality. What few perceive is that you are not your thoughts. You are the conscious space where thoughts appear and disappear like clouds crossing the infinite sky. Observe how a child sees clouds. She points, becomes enchanted, but never tries to hold one. Your adult mind, conditioned by the illusion of control, tries to grasp each thought, analyze it, resolve its internal dilemmas, as if it could capture vapor with its hands. This desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable is what transforms occasional thoughts into persistent obsessions. Buddhist tradition teaches through the image of leaves descending a river. You are on the bank observing. Some leaves are beautiful, others ugly, some float fast, others slow. But your function is not to jump in the water to collect leaves, only to observe the natural flow. When you try to stop a thought leaf, you end up being dragged by the mental current. The technique of detached observation radically transforms your relationship with thoughts. When you perceive rumination beginning, simply say, mentally, thought, and return your attention to breathing. Don't fight the thought. Don't analyze it. Just recognize it as a temporary phenomenon and gently redirect your attention. The third teaching touches the heart of all rumination. The illusion that thinking intensely about something gives us control over it. Buddha taught that suffering is born not from events themselves, but from our mental resistance to events. And this resistance manifests primarily through obsessive rumination about what we cannot alter. There exists a question that functions like a cosmic sword, instantly cutting 90% of all ruminations. Is this under my direct control at this moment? If the answer is no, any mental energy spent ruminating is wasted energy that could be invested in what you can effectively influence. The parable of the man pushing the boulder perfectly illustrates this wisdom. A traveler encounters a giant stone blocking his path and spends hours trying to move it, becoming increasingly frustrated. A sage passing by asks, "Why don't you go around the stone?" The traveler responds, "Because it shouldn't be here." Such are our ruminations. We spend infinite energy trying to mentally move what reality has already established. The liberating practice consists of creating two mental containers of direct action and conscious surrender. Whenever a worry arises, classify it immediately. If it's something you can act upon, do what's within your reach and stop ruminating. If it's something outside your control, consciously place it in the container of surrender. The fourth teaching reveals the most accessible antidote against rumination: conscious breathing as a bridge between agitated mind and natural serenity. When your mind is calm, your breathing flows naturally deep. When your breathing becomes conscious and rhythmic, your mind automatically quiets, a psychophysiological law that can be used as a tool of instantaneous liberation. Breathing is the only bodily process simultaneously automatic and voluntary, a perfect bridge between conscious and unconscious, between control and surrender. When you anchor your attention in breathing during episodes of rumination, you are literally substituting the object of concentration. Instead of feeding repetitive thoughts, you feed bodily presence. A Zen master used to say, "The mind is like a drunken monkey jumping from branch to branch." Breathing is the only rope strong enough to tie this monkey without hurting it. Each conscious inhalation is a gentle invitation for your scattered mind to return to the home of the present moment. The respiratory anchor technique is transformative. Inhale deeply through the nose, counting to 4. Hold the air for 2 beats. Exhale through the mouth, counting to 6. Repeat 5 times whenever you perceive rumination starting. The most important thing is not perfect technique, but the attitude of gentle curiosity, as if it were the first time you discovered this miracle that keeps you alive. The fifth teaching addresses one of the most neglected causes of modern rumination: the excess of stimuli that overload our natural capacity for mental processing. A mind bombarded by infinite information, constant choices, and multiple demands inevitably develops the habit of ruminating as a desperate attempt to organize chaos. Buddha lived radically simply, not out of masochistic asceticism, but from understanding that exterior simplicity cultivates interior clarity. Each unnecessary object, each superfluous commitment, each trivial decision consumes precious units of attention that could be invested in genuine discernment and lucid presence. The digital revolution, created a new type of rumination, the mind that never rests because it's constantly processing novelties, comparisons, and infinite notification. It's like trying to meditate at a party, technically possible, but unnecessarily difficult when you can choose an environment that naturally favors peace. The practice of liberating simplicity begins with 3 realms. Simplify your daily choices through routines that eliminate trivial decisions. Simplify your information intake by establishing specific times for news and social media. And simplify your physical environment by removing objects that generate neither joy nor serve clear function. The last teaching reveals perhaps the most consoling truth about rumination. It is impermanent by nature, like all mental and emotional experiences. When you are in the middle of a cycle of obsessive thoughts, it seems it will last forever. But this is only an illusion of the mind that has lost temporal perspective. Impermanence is not a comforting philosophy, but a natural law that absolutely governs everything in the universe. Stars are born and die. Civilizations arise and disappear, and your episodes of rumination also have inevitable beginning, middle, and end. Recognizing this truth during moments of mental torment is like remembering that storms always pass. There was a woman who suffered from chronic anxiety until she discovered the practice of labeling her mental states as temporary episode of anxiety instead of simply, I am anxious. This simple change in language created sufficient psychological distance for her to observe the phenomenon instead of being completely dominated by it. The practice of conscious impermanence consists of creating a personal mantra during episodes of rumination. This too shall pass. As everything passes, I am greater than any temporary state. When you can sustain this perspective even for a few seconds during the peak of rumination, you have already begun to create the inner space where natural peace can flourish. But what if there existed techniques so simple they could be applied at any moment, anywhere, to instantly break the cycle of rumination? Buddhist micro-practices are tools of spiritual emergency, small gestures that generate great transformations when applied with constancy and pure intention. The first is the 1-minute rule in the body. When you perceive rumination starting, identify 5 different physical sensations: your feet touching the ground, air entering through nostrils, skin temperature, shoulder position, taste in mouth. This technique instantly shifts your attention from the mental world to the sensory world, where rumination cannot survive. The second is the 1 complete breath rule. Inhale slowly through the nose. Pause for a moment, savoring the fullness of air in the lungs. Exhale gently through the mouth, releasing not only air, but all accumulated tension. A single conscious breath can break the hypnosis of repetitive thoughts. The third is the 1 simple gesture rule. Consciously relax your jaw and shoulders. What few perceive is that rumination always comes accompanied by specific muscular tension. When you dissolve physical tension, you automatically dissolve the mental tension that sustained it. The 8th chapter reveals how to transform your very internal language so it stops feeding rumination and begins nurturing serenity. The words you use to converse with yourself create internal realities. Changing these words is changing the quality of your mental experience. The first transformation is moving from what if to even if. Instead of what if I fail in this presentation, practice. Even if I fail in this presentation, I will learn something valuable. This subtle change transforms anticipated anxiety into serene preparation. You stop fearing possibilities and begin strengthening yourself to face them. The second transformation is moving from absolute to specific. Instead of, I always ruin everything, practice, in this specific situation, I lacked such resource or skill. Specificity reduces emotional charge and makes action possible. You stop condemning yourself globally and begin identifying specific aspects that can be developed. Each transformation in internal language is like changing the lenses through which you see reality. When you substitute words that amplify problems with words that reveal possibilities, your mind automatically seeks solutions instead of perpetuating dramas. And here's the point almost no one dares consider. Sometimes our own efforts to stop rumination end up feeding it in more subtle ways. The 9th chapter explores the unconscious traps that keep sincere minds trapped in cycles they should be breaking. The first mistake is confusing analysis with prevention, believing that thinking exhaustively about potential problems will prevent them from happening. This is a mental superstition disguised as prudence. Intelligent preparation is different from anxious rumination. The first takes concrete actions based on realistic scenarios. The second consumes infinite energy imagining unlikely catastrophes. The second mistake is hyperconsumption of self-help content without effective practice. Ironically, constantly seeking new techniques to stop rumination can become a sophisticated form of rumination. Your mind stays busy analyzing methods instead of applying them. Information without application becomes mental noise. The third mistake is self-judgment for ruminating, feeling guilt for having repetitive thoughts, which adds an extra layer of suffering to original suffering. It's like punishing yourself for being sick. Compassion toward yourself during episodes of rumination is an essential part of the healing process, not a sign of weakness. How do you know if these Buddhist practices are really transforming your relationship with rumination? The 10th chapter reveals the subtle but unmistakable signs that your mind is learning new patterns of functioning, milestones that celebrate your progress without creating new forms of self-demand. The first marker is decreased duration of rumination episodes. You may not be able to prevent them completely at first, but you'll perceive they don't extend for hours as before. Perhaps they're only minutes now. This temporal reduction indicates your mental redirection capacity is strengthening. The second marker is faster return to the present after moments of mental dispersion. Before, you could spend hours lost in thoughts without noticing. Now, you notice when your mind wanders and can bring it back more easily. This metacognitive awareness, knowing that you are thinking, is a sign of inner awakening. The third marker is making simpler and more spontaneous decisions in daily life. When your mind stops spending energy ruminating about imaginary problems, more clarity remains for real choices. You become more decisive, not from impulsivity, but from mental efficiency. The 11th chapter deepens the central role of conscious breathing as the most direct entrance to all other Buddhist teachings against rumination. Your breathing carries within itself the wisdom of all practices: presence, detachment, acceptance, simplicity, and impermanence, condensed into a single vital function. When you breathe consciously, you automatically anchor yourself in the present. It's impossible to breathe in the past or future. When you observe your breathing without trying to control it, you practice detachment from results. When you accept the natural rhythm of inspiration and expiration, you cultivate the wisdom of releasing the uncontrollable. Breathing also teaches simplicity. It is the simplest and most vital action you perform, thousands of times per day, without needing equipment, complex techniques, or special conditions. And it constantly demonstrates impermanence. Each inspiration ends in an expiration. Each expiration opens space for new inspiration. The master practice consists of associating conscious breathing with daily triggers. Every time you open a door, drink a sip of water, or sit in a chair, breathe consciously 3 times. These micro-trainings create a network of presence anchors throughout the day that automatically interrupt rumination cycles before they gain momentum. The journey through the 6 Buddhist teachings against rumination reveals a unifying truth: presence, detachment, surrender, breathing, simplicity, and trust in impermanence are aspects of the same quality of consciousness, the mind that rests in itself without needing to think compulsively about life. Each teaching is like a different entrance to the same inner palace of peace. You can begin with breathing and discover presence, or begin with simplicity and find detachment. All paths converge to the same destination: a mind free from the tyranny of its own repetitive thoughts. Transformation doesn't happen through technical perfection, but through loving and persistent application. Be gentle with yourself during this process. You are undoing mental conditioning that took years to form. Each moment of consciously chosen presence is a victory. Each conscious breath is a step toward freedom. The practice doesn't seek to eliminate thoughts. It seeks to transform your relationship with them. A truly free mind is not one that never thinks, but one that thinks when it wants to think and rests when it wants to rest. This is the peace that surpasses all understanding, not absence of mental activity, but presence that embraces everything without being disturbed by anything. The journey we traveled today revealed a liberating truth that can completely transform your relationship with your own mind. Rumination is not a personal deficiency nor a permanent curse, but a learned mental habit that can be consciously unlearned through millennial practices tested by millions of seekers. Each Buddhist teaching we explored is a precise tool in the mental liberation kit that your spiritual ancestors developed for you. But true transformation doesn't happen through intellectual understanding, but through daily and patient application of these principles until they become your second nature. Your ruminative mind took years to develop. Be gentle with yourself while it learns new patterns of functioning. In each moment you choose presence instead of rumination. You are rewriting the operational code of your consciousness and planting seeds of peace that will flourish throughout your life. If these millennial truths touched your heart and awakened in you the recognition that a life free from obsessive rumination is not only possible, but is your natural right as a conscious being, then allow your gratitude to transform into sacred action. Tap the like so more souls imprisoned by their own minds can find these liberating teachings. Subscribe to this channel to continue receiving the ancestral tools of inner transformation. Share this wisdom with all those you know are silently struggling against their own thoughts. And in the comments, declare with courage which of these 6 teachings most touched your soul. For each sincere sharing of insight strengthens the field of collective consciousness and accelerates the healing of all who seek peace. May the wisdom of spiritual ancestors illuminate each choice you make between rumination and presence. May your mind become an obedient servant of your awakened heart, and no longer a tyrant that governs your days with infertile worries. May you discover in the daily practice of these teachings the inexplicable joy of a consciousness that rests in itself without needing to think compulsively about life. And may your inner peace become a silent beacon that inspires others to find the same eternal refuge within their own souls.